is to, the way that we begin to touch it is, let's just start looking at what a story is and say, can you name what story you're living in today? And so we're beginning to look at the narratives that we're in consciously or unconsciously. What story are you living in today? I'll tell you, I'll just begin by modeling this. My name's Leah Lamb. I am beaming in from Topanga, California, where the internet is unstable, where life feels a little unstable right now, if I don't say. So maybe that's what story I'm living in right now. I'm living in the real unknown. I'm really in a very committed story of really what is it to live in an unknowable, unnameable, mysterious time where so many stories are happening at once. So I'm in the story of deep listening. That's one way of meeting this. And so we're all in different stories. What I've noticed is that people tend to go towards the positive. And I love that. I'm a positive person too, and I really believe in the power of our words. What I want to do is make a little bit of space for anything and everything as we speak to what is the story that we're in. While I'm asking you to be succinct in this, because this is really just our intro, but it's a way for us to start to get into this conversation of how do we look at working the story as a tool. And this is our first opportunity to practice. You can stick your comment in the chat or you can speak it out loud. So. And Kate, I see that you chose to wrote yours. I can't speak English today, apparently. I'm in the past tense. Do you want to speak it out loud or do you want me to read it?
I can speak it out loud. I feel like that, very much like you spoke, that I am in this place of observing, of seeing history unfold before me and being able to step back and just observe and marvel at that I really am at this time that we've been talking about for so long.
And I'm going to interrupt you just because I do want to model us being absolutely succinct, okay? And what we're doing is we're almost, thank you, I appreciate that. And you model that, and it's a tricky thing when I'm asking you to give us the title of the story that you're living in. Because if we get into the depths, we will never make it to the class because it's such deep times. So it's just kind of like, can you touch the story that you're living in? And can you touch the title of the book that you're living in? Emma's saying, do you raise your hand or simply unmute yourself? Why don't you go next, Emma? And I'm just going to close the door. I'm sorry, they're cutting the lawn quite loudly outside my front door, so I just need to reduce the noise. Okay.
Hi,
Emma.
Liam, thank you. I'm living in a story of sorrow and loss right now.
Thank you. Anyone else want to tell us your name, where you're coming from? If there's anything that you're looking for specifically from today and the name of the story that you were living in. Yes, Fred.
So Fred Mindlin, I'm in Watsonville, California, and I would call this story The Bold Transformer, Repurposing Grief.
Okay. And I just want to invite you, you can just take yourself off mute and just speak. We probably have time for about 4 more people, and then we're going to dive into our class today.
Then I'll go next. I'm living in the story of uncertainty, of the ground shaking under my emotional and psychological self and finding a new path.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm in the Jemez Mountains in New Mexico. And the story I'm living in right now is unweaving in the void.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Mika's coming in from Germany. All right. I started making these classes at 10 a.m. so that People from Germany can attend. It's later in the day for you. All
Okay.
right.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
Jackie from Germany. Well, it's not late, it's 7 p.m.
All right.
I'm not a native English speaker, but I try my best. I would say I'm living in the story of finding strength in nature, story of transformation and deep nature, experience in the midst of everything.
Okay, let us dive in. So I don't normally pin my video, but I'm going to do it just because the auto thing won't work. I want to watch the view. I often enjoy doing that. That way you can see everyone. And if you want to be able to see just me and not be distracted, you can do that too. So I made it like that. I'm actually going to make it so that I can see all of you because I find that more entertaining myself. So today, what we're doing is we're doing an introduction to storytelling as a sacred art form, specifically looking at how do we work with story as a tool for social change, both internally and externally. This is going to be a cursory introduction, but it's going to give you, you're going to be able to catch the scent of what we're doing. And what I really do encourage you to do is please feel free to ask your questions. I love your questions. Your questions are what inspire. I like that word. Inspire and deepen our conversation. And so you can always raise your hand. I'm going to see them, or you can put a question in the chat box. There's going to be some times where I am going to ask a question, and they're real questions. So just so you know, when I ask a question, I'm not being in my own mind. It's a moment for us to all pause and hear some more voices. And just a couple more voices coming in. And oh, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. So please tell me if I don't. It looks like Shanalina. So if I didn't pronounce that right, please say. And I'm from Los Angeles. So hello, dear neighbor. And my title is The Bubble is Bursting. Yeah, that's very resonant to me too. So much change. We're in a time of such change. And story is, the narrative is driving the change. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit, but I really want to go to what we're here for, which is this introduction to sacred storytelling. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what is sacred storytelling, what is a story, how does it affect us. I'm going to try to really weave in as much as physically possible. What does this mean to us in this moment in time that we're in so much global transformation, and how to look at story through that way. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the roles that we're playing in this time. How do we meet the time? How do we determine our roles through the realm and play of story? I'm seeing a question that just came in. Fred's asking, have you worked with a sign language interpreter while telling and or recording stories? No, I haven't. Sorry about that. But I do know a fantastic interpreter that's based in Maui. So if you're looking for that, I can try to connect you. So the way that I like to begin is actually with our eyes closed. And really allowing ourselves to close your eyes, lean back just for a moment. Even if you are doing the dishes or taking care of something and your video isn't on, I invite you to really just give yourself this moment. And as you lean back and just feel what it is to rest for a moment, because these are times filled with unrest. And we want to be alive in that unrest. And what is that graceful place of knowing and finding that ease that can be in our body while also being in the dis-ease that is so alive in our times? How expansive can we be to be alive with both? So in this moment, I'm going to invite you to find that ease, that place that lives inside of your body, and maybe just ask your body, and by now you might have just been naturally beginning to pay attention to your breath. So continue to do that, not forcing any deep breath, just allowing yourself to notice. And maybe just ask your body, where does ease live inside of me? And allow yourself to be surprised by how your body answers. Where does ease live inside of me? The answer that just emerged in my being was at the bottoms of my feet, which makes sense because that's what touches the earth, and the tips of my fingers, which makes sense to me because that's what touches language, communication. That's where I find ease in my body today. We all have different answers. And now allowing yourself to take in this nice deep breath. And as you take in these nice deep breaths, allowing them to go all the way down to the bottom of your belly. I'm going to invite you to even breathe through your nostril, because something happens with our nervous system and actually calms our nervous system when we specifically breathe in and out through our nostrils. So allow yourself to breathe in and out. Breathing in. And the reason we do this is, I'm going to invite you to keep breathing, is because as storytellers, we're the seers of the world. We're not the carriers of news and information. We're the carriers of making meaning. We're giving value of what is happening to the context and the meaning making that we're providing. So it's a massive job to be a storyteller in this time. It's a massive responsibility to consciously create and to consciously speak into these times, knowing the power of your voice. And as storytellers, we're seeing past the first line, past the second, straight through into the multidimensionality of what's happening. So as storytellers, we also don't just hold the moment, but we hold the whole web, the big story. So we can see that things that look bad might actually be good. Things that look good might actually be bad. And we even as storytellers don't like to use those simplified language of good and bad, because this just oversimplifies everything and doesn't let us live in the truth of the big story. So another way to say that is, what looks like a blessing could be a curse, and what looks like a curse could be a blessing. So already as I begin to speak this, I begin to feel this big we get to be in, this more expansive place. And so I'm inviting you into this expansive place of how big of a story can we allow ourselves to step into today. And just reminding you in this moment, what did you come here for? As listeners, as tellers, as someone who heard the call of a sacred story. What does it mean to be a sacred storyteller in our times? I invite you to keep listening for that question for yourself. What role to play in this time? And we'll get to play with that in the realm of story. Okay, so I'm going to begin us off with a quote. You can keep your eyes closed or you can open it. And this quote says, "We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. They tell us to love or hate, to see or be seen, and often, too often, stories saddle us, they ride us, they whip us onward, and they tell us what to do. And we do it without questioning." I'm going to read that. I'm going to read it again, because more than ever, as we are being bombarded by so many narratives, I want to allow us to let the wisdom of this to really take root in us. The stories, they tell us to love or hate, to see or be seen. And often, too often, stories saddle us and they ride us and they whip us onward and they tell us what to do, and we do it without questioning. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear them, these stories, to question these stories, to hear silence, to name these stories, and then become a storyteller. That quote's by Rebecca Solnit. She's a very engaged activist journalist. And I like to read this because it really speaks to the responsibility of becoming a storyteller. That if you don't know what a story is, and if you don't know how it's running your life consciously and unconsciously, then what happens when you take the role of storyteller? And so I appreciate the wisdom in this, saying, whoa, let's start at the starting point. Before you go, get to the on your mark, get set, and then go. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be getting set so you can go after this class. Okay. My other favorite quote that I just love to begin with is, the business of stories is not enchantment. Oh, thought it was. The business of stories is not escape. But I use it that way. The business of stories is waking up. That's by Martin Shaw. And let's just say that, stories have done all of that. They do all of that and more. But I love this too, because again, it speaks the importance and the relevance of the times that we're living in, and what to the conscious evolution of the storyteller. So, we can go back to our mythic, romantic version of storytellers in indigenous times, going from tribe to tribe. And those people were revered, and they were fed, and they were nourished, and they were listened to. And when they gathered around, that they were carrying the information, the history of the times, so that village after village wouldn't have to make the same mistakes. So there's an evolutionary process. When your storyteller carries the history of the past, then there's an evolutionary process, so we get to all stand on each other's shoulders and learn from each other. And that they're saying it's not escape. It's like, hey, don't go watching Hulu 24/7 right now. Maybe consider not going on the binge watch of Game of Thrones for the fourth time. It's like, really start thinking about what are you using for escape, and can the stories themselves be a form of waking up, both in the determination of really being disciplined about what stories you listen to and what stories you tell. So Martin Shaw we're lucky to be alive at the same time. He's one of the few bards alive right now. A little bit of history about where I come from is I grew up on a farm in Vermont, and I moved almost between Vermont, Virginia, and New York City fairly equally. So I got to live in a lot of different stories at a very young age, to a lot of different cultures. And I really fell in love with the land. And the land is really, I would say, where my listening began. I was very, very lucky, and my parents noticed a talent in me very young, and they got to study with professional trainers in the world of acting and theater from the time I was a teenager, and ended up going straight to acting school out of high school in New York City, and studied under the tutelage of Sandy Meisner. And I really got to understand that something extraordinary happens in the world of telling a story, and in the world of theater, is that there's this magic that happened in the room, and that there was something palpable and alive and connected. And I didn't understand it as a young person. I did know that I wanted to get involved with social change, and I did know that I didn't want to get stuck speaking other people's words. So I ended up going into writing and playwriting, and I ended up following my passion for social justice, which eventually led me through working with Youth at Risk as a wilderness guide. And I ended up working and getting a master's in social work, and doing emergency work and community organizing for social change. And in that, all along the way, this palpable love and understanding of story, and how do we use and catalyze that energy of story for social change? How do we harness all that energy that's created in that space and then focalize it? And so that question ended up getting me into the world of San Francisco, where I worked with a lot of amazing films and filmmakers creating social impact campaigns. And then for their films. So again, take the story, put it into action. And then I ended up working with Al Gore, and I produced and hosted the Green Channel right there at the nexus of how we were trying to discuss climate change. And I have this recipe that I would use, and that recipe says, how do we give people the information to give them the inspiration, to get them to motivation, to get them to activation? And after doing this for years and years and years, I actually learned that I was asking the wrong question. People don't need more information. We are not computers. We are not run by numbers. We are humans, and we are storytellers. And what people need and want and desire is story. I got to see all the data. The data showed it to me. That's what people are going for. And it brought me back to the truth of who I am. And I got to have this, my own personal journey, which I won't go too deep into at all right now, but to find the truth of that, my essence, the genius that flows through me, and we all have genius that flows through us, right? The genius that flows through me is through story. And through, I ended up coming closer and closer and closer to the truth of what I am and how I understand story as being that doorway to the divine. It's that doorway to the ancients, to the wisdoms teachings, and to the mystery teachings. And so I ended up working with story and ceremony and doing large-scale ceremonies for communities to work with story as a healing device. So it's a little bit about, where I'm coming from this perspective. And now let's kind of dive into it. So the ancient wisdom on our planet tells us so much about story. And the Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful that words can raise enough energy to speed up the world or slow it down. You can do that as a storyteller. You can change, the pace of time through our words. Sicilians believe that words are so powerful they poke holes in the universe. So think about the last time that someone was so passionate and they said some things that they can't take back. The Australians say that the stories of the past must be sung to the present so that the future can exist. I always think about this when there's this claim and this call for the new story. I want a new story, I want a new story, I want a new story. That's a very suspect thing to say because it sounds like they're trying to cut us from the roots of where we came from because it just so good. There, cut that off, give me a new story. Well, but then we don't get to gain all the wisdom. We don't get to integrate the deep knowledge or integrate the wisdom. Learn from mistakes. What is it to have an open heart that's been broken? That's a different kind of heart than the heart that doesn't know any better. So the broken heart remembers, but it chooses to keep loving. And that's a next chapter. So I always, integrate this idea of like, maybe we stop asking for a new story and start saying, I'm ready for my next chapter. Which we are going into in this world right now. What a time. So all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. And I'm just going to go back. I'm sorry, I just caught myself. We are going into a new chapter. And we don't know what that chapter is. But I will say, and I'm going to say this throughout, now more than ever is the time to plant the seeds for the chapter that you most want to live in. So don't think that someone else's vision of the world, the thing that you fear most, has already been created. Because we're creating the future with every single step and every single word that we speak. That's why I like to start the class with this particular place. Abracadabra is one of the oldest words on the planet. It's an ancient Aramaic word, and it comes from Aramaic mysticism. It says, I create as I speak. So as I was saying, all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. The world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I had the privilege of sitting in ceremony with some elders. This was last year. And while we were sitting in ceremony around this fire, this big heaviness started to come over our group. People started to fall asleep. And I got really afraid. And I started speaking my fear. And this elder, slapped me out of that. And she said, do not waste your voice on your fear right now. This is the time that you pray for your life. And it was such a teaching, because so oftentimes we are, it's like my habits, like, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that. It's like, how do you use your voice? I'm praying for peace. I'm praying for safety. These are the things that I'm going to pray for and step towards and take action towards, right? So it's like, we're doing this. Sorry to be so preachy today. You can just tell me at any time, stop with the preaching. I don't usually get like this, but it's like, this is where we're going. Okay, so let's get into this. What is a story? This is the real question. My gosh, we started to touch on it, but what the heck is it? What is a story? What is a story? Anyone want to speak? And what we can do is this, is we can start to play at the game of eloquence. Eloquence is you don't always know what you're going to say, but you know that there's something inside you that needs to be said, right? And so when we enter into the realm of eloquence, it's that saying, it's like you're hearing the spirit, you're hearing the life inside of you that says, it's my time to speak. It doesn't happen. Sometimes we just know it's not our time to speak, and there's a stillness and there's an ease inside of us. But when we know that it's our time to speak and there's something that's coming alive, and this is a time to do this. And so eloquent isn't about being clever. It isn't having all the right words in all the right place, being strategic. Eloquence is feeling that sense of being grounded to the earth, open to spirit, and talking slowly so that it can come through you, so that there's something more than you that's just speaking, but there's something else. So if you want to just play, and you're like, I want a story. I mean, there's no wrong answer for what is a story. It's great. You know, you can't go wrong. And Jennifer's going to take her hand at it. And so that's the time that you get to play. Okay, I am trying to, we're playing the Unmute Wars. It's not going to let me unmute you. Can you unmute? There you go. Okay.
I think I got it. All right, did I get it?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I'm at a car dealership, so I'm having an interesting story right now because my car is here, and I've just been informed that there's something new coming into my life in the world of repairs.
Okay.
But I was so pleased to see your invitation this morning, and I'm really happy to be here. So when you say what is a story, what showed up for me, and one of the things that I love about your work is the invitation to step into this sort of imaginal and intuitive intelligences rather than that like analytical and synthesizing intelligences we spend so much time in. And so what immediately showed up for me when you said what is a story, or what is story, is I immediately saw like a lamp, like a desk lamp, and the way that it illuminates, it puts some things more into light and other things deeper into shadow. So like the perspective, like the idea of a story being almost like that lamp, but with words, like bringing some things out to be perceived more clearly, and simultaneously, just by virtue of doing that, putting other things,
Okay.
de-accentuating other things. Yeah.
So you're talking about story as a focalizer, is what I'm hearing you say. That story has this capacity where it's like we choose what room in the house. So like, you know, we're all living in a, gosh, you know, we're living in a mansion right now, let's say, in terms of the world that we're in, you know, and a story it's like, what room are we all going to go to together? When we share a story, we actually oftentimes will also step into this bizarre, amazing shared belief system, right? And that belief system is saying, you know, we agree on this story. If we're all going to share the story together, you know. So if there's a group of people that are, and I just can't resist because it's just the times that we're living in, you know. No, I'm not going to even try to pick apart all the different stories that we're in. It's too hairy. Okay, but I can say is that what I will speak to this, you know, is that you're right. A story focalizes something, and here's what is amazing about the times that I am going to speak to, is that in the past, you know, when you know, let's just say that, you know, before we started all intermingling, you had your township, you had your village, you had your tribe, and you had the same creation stories, and there were the same belief systems, and there was all one shared story. And as our world has expanded and more and more and more people have come into it, and as we have gone into this globalized culture, and as we have done this extraordinary thing of intermingling so many different people, you know, there's a beautiful thing that's going to come up in a couple of weeks, and I'm so excited for. And a woman, Brooke Medicine Eagle is going to come and she's going to tell us the story of White Buffalo. And this is an old story from the Lakota tradition about the rainbow people and how people of all different kinds of people, of all different colors, were going to come together. You know, and it's an extraordinary story, and I would say it's a story of our time. But in this also is that we are, as humans, having to learn a skill that no humans have ever had to do at one time together, which is how do we all share so many stories at once? Because in the past, we've always had one shared story. You know, and you can look at it from, you know, back in the ancients to, you can look at it to, you know, in the 20s radio came on, we were all listening to the same thing. You know, in the 50s televisions came on, we only had access to what they would tell us. We didn't even know that there was, some people didn't know there was more than what was being told, right? And then in 2007, the gatekeepers blew open, and no longer were we limited to just what the mainstream media would give us. Now everyone had a smartphone, not everyone, excuse me, those who had a smartphone and had social media had a microphone. And that was the first time in the history of humankind that we've had access to that much information and that much sight into other people's realities that we're not experiencing within our own bubble. So I say this in the context of what is a story, and that it's a focalizer, which Jennifer just said, hi. Good to see you again. Is that, you know, this is in a wild time, because how do we know which story to focus on? How do we know which stories to share? You know, how do we know what stories to carry? You know, how do we know what stories are true? God, that's one of the biggest questions I'm in right now. How do you know it's true? And that's just a weird word. So, great. What's another, who else wants to take yes, Rika. Am I saying that right? Rika? Rika.
Yes, Rika, it is.
Rika.
What came to me is a story is an invitation to connect through a telling of a change, a development from a chosen perspective, chosen by the storyteller. And it's an invitation to connect and to resonate with that.
Ah, okay. So you're going for the connection and resonance part of storytelling. You're getting into the science of storytelling, which I just love. So let's get into the science.
I'm a singer, so I come at this from the perspective of sharing songs.
Oh, do you know any? Do you know the science of resonance? Can you share any of that with us? I don't mean
okay, that's a different perspective. I was just meaning that when you sing a story, when you tell a story through song, the connection with the audience, if it's done well, if the audience can feel the feelings that you transport or that you let flow through you, then they kind of resonate in the same way that, like, a guitar string makes the wooden body of the guitar resonate, which is what projects the sound when it's plucked.
Yep.
And resonance, there's it's basically, it's like a sinus wave. Mm-hmm. And you can where you put your finger on a string shortens the strings and shortens the waves, and there are certain things that go well together, like when it's exactly half, then you have an octave.
I'm gonna stop you there only because I want to go on to what you're saying, and thank you for bringing that to us, because it's the science of resonance, and what happens in that connection is profound. So I'm gonna speak to a couple of different things. One is, just because you brought it up, you know, this is embarrassing, I don't know the exact time, so I'm gonna say back in the King Arthur times, they understood that sound and song was so powerful that they actually legalized certain chords being played together because they knew that it would evoke revolt and rebellion. So that's how powerful sound is. So imagine when we join our voices together, you know, and also sound has the capacity to change the mood in the space faster than anything. So think about also, you know, the songs that come out of the freedom marches and how powerful these songs can be and how they evoke something in you. They can open your heart. They can change the mood in the room. And something also happens when we sing our stories, right? Is that there's a sense of unity and unifying that can happen like nothing else. So that's just on song, which I don't normally think. And stories do live in songs. So let's just talk about that connection piece and that resonance piece that you're also speaking to. So if I was to take you on a little journey to the bottom of the ocean right now, and at the bottom of this ocean is this beautiful woman. And this woman is laying there with this blue dress billowing out, and sparkles are all around her head, and they're sparkling from her head, and they're going all the way up to the top of the ocean. So how many of you were able to see that image, that scene? Okay, so we just time traveled, reality traveled. I'm gonna point out a little technique that I did, right? You felt it rather than sensed it. So we all sense and see different things. So you felt the resonance. So, right. So you just talked about that transmission that storytellers can happen. So my style of storytelling is I put myself right in there. So the pacing slowed a little bit because we're in ocean time. I used the word the most beautiful woman in the world without describing what she looked like. Because if I described what she looked like, I would start to impose an idea of what beauty looks like. But if I just allow the most beautiful woman in the world to be there, then all of a sudden your idea of beauty gets to emerge and live in your own story. So you can see how powerful storytellers are in terms of imposing an idea of values, belief systems, what we see. One of the things that was happening was that this part of my brain was starting to activate, and that part of your brain, the exact same part of your brain, also activated. And so what happened was we created this magical connection where we location traveled, a little feeling traveled, and what I'm calling magic, Princeton calls neural coupling. So our brains literally link. Look, we're not even in the same room, right? Mirror neurons, exactly. So if you want to start thinking about who's powerful in the world, like we're getting all this VR and augmented reality and all this stuff, that's great, but it's almost detraining our systems for the intelligence that we have, and I'm sure it's doing something that will do something, I don't know what. But don't forget how powerful your brain is and your imagination is, and that your imagination is something that deserves a workout just like anything else. You want to keep your imagination in good shape, and so that it's activated and engaged, because we need your imagination right now, because your imagination is what builds the future. It's what builds the story. So it builds new possibilities. So what I'll speak to in terms of a very unromantic version of what a story is that if we speak to our bodies in reference to the latest technology, and we say that a story is an operating system, and that operating system is what teaches us our belief systems, our values, and what we believe is possible. So now think about all the programming that you watch on TV, and what does that, or into the movies, and what does that teach you or create expectations about what life is supposed to look like or feel like for you to be happy, for you to be joyful. And just think about, the story of happily ever after, the story of the prince, the story of, whatever, the story of, being more successful than the Joneses, it's like all of these, and it feels like there's this great untangling, wait, what is my story? And I feel like that's so important. What is the truth of your story? So if we figure out that's what a story is in a very unromantic sense, now the next question that we're going to enter into as a group is, what is a sacred story? What is a sacred story?
Hi, Leah. It's Emily here. What came to my mind was a sacred story is a story that opens us all to a universal truth truth or theme or something that's kind of beyond.
Great. So you're speaking to that. There's something that's living in that story that's beyond. But what you said, and I'm humored that also at the same time Rika was saying the same thing, that there's a universal thread in the sacred story. That there's something that what I would say in again an oversimplifying, less poetic way, is to say the story isn't about me. The story is about us. So that means that I can actually tell you a story about the time that I got, that I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and I went through that experience. But when I tell it as a sacred story, I'm telling that story on the other side of it because I've mined the wisdom, I've mined the learning, I'm living the medicine of what it is to go through that kind of journey. And now I'm here to tell the story. And I'm here to give you the story so that one day, if you find yourself in such a moment of crisis, you can call on it. So it's one of the ways that we give our gifts when we bring into that universal theme. So again, it's no longer about me; it's about you. Well, that kind of sounds strange. John Steinbeck says the stories must be about the reader, or it will not continue to exist. So again, it's a subtle energy, and I teach this a lot in my class, and I'll just speak to it. There's, if we go through it, if we tell a trauma story or any trauma story where a big thing that's happened, you go through different stages. And the stage one might be, and we saw this in the Me Too movement, right? Listen to me, witness me, and that is about me. That's about my experience, and I'm also being very conscious in my approach to the listeners. And I'm asking for a certain kind of tending and listening, and witnessing. And so that's stage one. And then you go to the next stage. And this next stage is you're going to start to harvest and cultivate and go into this universal, Emma just spoke to this kind of like the kind of unseen, the unknowable space. And one of the ways I love to work with story, especially when we work with this healing, is take it into the mythic dimension. And the mythic dimension, in Michael Meade, who's another profound mythologist living in our times, is that it lives, he says he lives behind this dimension. And so it's where we can see things in their symbolic form, in their archetypal form, in their metaphoric form. What is metaphor but the language of spirit? So when we can take our story and then transpose it into a mythic dimension, all of a sudden we can roll back and see it from a whole different perspective, because it's no longer my story and my ego and my rightness and my pain and blah, blah, blah. It's like you can be like, oh, wow, what was this? If this is the story of my soul is on this epic, wild adventure, what does this mean to that journey? And then you can back up and come into a bigger story. And then we can come back, and then we cultivate everything that we learned, and then we bring it back into the linear, realm, and then we've been able to harvest the wisdom and harvest the gems and bring it into this form of sacred story. So to me, when I say sacred story, there's a couple of things. There's a commitment to generosity. There's a commitment to standing on the path of elderhood. I'm here to give you something. And this is a thing for the storyteller, because we all go into our things, we're all going to do whatever we have, and it's got our biggest shadow and our biggest gift, right? So if you're someone that doesn't feel seen in life, you might want to be like, I'm going to be a storyteller, everyone's going to see me, but if you're like, blah, 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 nobody wants to look, So it's like storytelling is actually like sacred storytelling. It's like, oh, I'm going to give you a gift, and you're using all your energy because you know that you've got so much to give that you're giving it away. So something that's kind of in between the words that I'm speaking is that there's a life force in the story. There is something that you can give. And so, when I say the word sacred storytelling, I hate using the word sacred just because it's blah, blah, blah. But I use that word because what does sacred mean? It means a relationship with the divine, a relationship with the unseen world, a relationship with that which can't be always known or understood. And so I use that word because so many people in our times do not have a relationship with the sacred. It's an indigenous perspective of seeing the life in all things. And so we use that word to call back that way of living and that way of being and that way of seeing the world. And when we combine it with the word sacred storytelling, now we are activating with our language our commitment to say, I see the life in all things, even the spirit of this story. Now, how do I become so humble as to come into the relationship with this living spirit of the story that might know more than I do? That can give me more access to wisdom and more access to things that I can't quite do based on my little human experience. But if I can be so quiet as to listen to the spirit of the story and allow myself to open to receive that kind of intelligence, that kind of wisdom, perhaps the trees outside will speak through me. Perhaps the earth that I stand on will speak through me. You know, perhaps I will hear the trill of that jay and all of a sudden understand something that I've never known because of the kind of listening when working with a calling forth and telling a sacred storytelling isn't in the ego brain. It's not in the wrinkles of your brow. It's out here. It's in this wider space of deep listening. So to me, that's what distinguishes a sacred story. And so if we go on the flip side of it, you know, Fred, I think you could tell this class by heart by now. You've heard me do this spiel so long. But the flip side of it, I'm going to do it really brief because I really want to give you guys an exercise. We've never done this before, so it's you know, keep coming because you know something new every day. So if we say what is a zombie story is the opposite. So a zombie story is that story that doesn't have a life force that's here to serve life. And so an example of a zombie story, well, gosh, we're surrounded by them, right? Holy cow. So every time you hear a story right now, I'm going to invite you in the news to do, like, if you can have like a beep, 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 like transmitting device, you know, and start to ask yourself, okay, you know, as the story comes in, you know, what is this activating in me? You know, what is it plugging into? What is it enlivening? What is it deadening and killing, you know? And so that you can start to see and sense and smell, is this a story that is here to awaken and enliven me and to activate me into calling forth the world I most want to be in? Ooh, there's a lot of those right now, you know, holy cow. Or is this a story that's here to deaden me and fill me with fear and fright and fill me with horrific visions of what might happen, you know? Sometimes those can be motivating stories in the strangest of way, but again, what are we consciously putting into the world? What do we consciously want to give to people who don't maybe have these skills yet? So an example of a zombie story is Jaws. I'm just gonna say it really, really fast, is that Jaws was written by Peter Benchley, picked up by Steven Spielberg. It was produced. That story single-handedly was responsible for a massive fear of sharks. And I can go into the whole background of it, but I'm not going to today. But that fear actually also began to be responsible for the mass kill-off and acceptance of kill-off of this keystone species that is actually really important to all of our health and wellness. And when Peter Benchley realized the harm that his story had created, he spent the rest of his life trying to undo that damage. So I say cautionary tale because I don't think that there's a potential making zombie stories, but I do think that we are in a time of waking up to the awareness of how much influence and power we have with our language. And so, you know, how can you be so aware of your power in that way? And again, speaking the prayer for the world that you most want to live in, not just your fear. You know, how do you answer your fear through a prayer and through a prayer in action? Okay, so let's play a game. I've never played this before and I'm really excited. And so it's, you know, I think so many of us are saying, okay, what role do we play in this time? You know, and when I look at this in storytelling, one of my favorite questions is to say, what is your apocalyptic archetype? What is your apocalyptic archetype? And as you do that, you know, it's like, so first of all, I just want to honor that, you know, what is an apocalypse? Okay, so apocalypse, you know, it's a word, there's so many words that have been hijacked, you know, like change. I'm just gonna go off. How did change become the bad guy. Climate change movement made this idea of change as this horrific idea. Well, change is like the one constant we have on this planet. You know, everything changes. So it's like, oh, it's still here. Okay. So, you know, we have to be, you want to be wary of these words that have been hijacked. And you can always, the keys are in the code. The codes are in the words. So you can get an etymology dictionary and have so much fun going back to the origin, because all of a sudden when you understand what the language really is, it actually does make a lot of sense. So apocalypse actually is a Greek word. It means a lifting of the veils. It's able to see what's really there. So all the racism, all the social injustice, some of the police brutality, there's something pretty crazy going on right now. That's always been there. It's not like that just like popped up this year or in the last 3 years. You know, that has been there. But what do we have now? Oh my God, more capacity to see it, more tools to see it, more consciousness to see it. And like lifting of the veils, this time in the world, it is time to see what's really happening so that we can face it. What do we know about dealing with a wild animal? Don't ever turn and run. It's going to kill you. Turn and face it. So we use that with our stories too. You know, our stories, we can use our stories and our sacred stories to turn and face what's happening. We can tell the stories in such a powerful way. This is the one last thing I'll say before we go into this fun exercise, is that we can tell stories that bring people to the darkest corners, to look at the horror, to see the things that they're most afraid of. As storytellers, we have that capacity as long as we also weave in beauty and grace. Beauty is what feeds the soul. It's what gives us the capacity and the strength to face those things that are so hard. So even our news right now, oh my gosh, there's so many extraordinary images of people coming together right now. You know, it's like we need those images. That gives us the strength to keep facing, you know, the horrors of the moment. So that's part of our job, is to bring beauty to the moment. It's part of the work. That's what feeds our soul. And that's what gives us the capacity. Okay, so here's the fun game. You ready? So our apocalyptic archetypes. So this is, you know, so we don't know what story we're in. So this is a tricky thing, or maybe you do know what story you're in. But when you choose your role, and you're really clear what your role is, it almost doesn't matter what story you're in, because you start to create the story based on the role that you choose to play. Okay, so I can go all linear, and we can speak about victims and perpetrators. You know, so if you're like, I'm a victim of this story, you know, you're going to start acting the role of the victim. People are going to start doing it. Okay, so it's a very dangerous can of worms that I just opened up, and so I'm just going to put it down in the opening up of a other way of thinking, that, you know, that when we take a role in a story, the world begins to organize around us. So now let's take it from a different kind of perspective, which is, so if you're apocalyptic archetype, what is your essence energy? Where's the life force energy inside you and how it wants to live? And so we're going into the archetypal energy, which is these universal things, and we're entering into the world of symbolism. So some examples, you might say that you're a bridge builder. You're going to bridge between worlds. Maybe you're a mechanic, and you're going and you're fixing all the things that are broken. Maybe you are a hacker, and your job is to hack through and break through every system that doesn't work. You've got your axe and you're going through the forest. Perhaps you are a dragon and you are here with big magic, and you can breathe fire on things, and you can flap your wings and put wind on things. Perhaps you're a sunflower and you're here your job is to like follow the sun and bring a lot of positive energy and feed all the birds. You know, it's, so I really invite you to think about this, and I'm going to invite you to even claim and say it so that we can all play it and be inspired by each other. You know, and you can either type it or you can say it out loud. And I'll give you a little example, because I've been playing with this for a long time. And for me, it's like one of my archetypes. You can have more than one. You can have 3 different archetypes, by the way. Why not? It's just like your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign. You know, you just stole mine. Oh my God. I was going to say I'm a bridge builder too. So Jessica, good to see you again. So I claim bridge builder too. And I just learned a couple things about bridge building because my cat, my beloved cat, you know, the first day of lockdown in LA, or yeah, our new world of curfews, gets chased by coyotes and climbs 80 feet up into a tree, you know, and so, you know, our whole neighborhood got involved. And we ended up getting these huge boards, and I built my cat a bridge out of the tree and onto this deck. I did my job, right? I built the bridge. But then I also and then I had to go into like this method of like, how do I coerce or convince or lead the parade of my cat to cross the bridge? And it was such a beautiful lesson because it's like a bridge, it's narrow and it's unknown, and it's going to take you somewhere where you haven't been before. And it was such a great lesson for me to get to understand that you can be a bridge builder, you know, but then there also comes the time of the patience, you know, just building the bridge, it's where the job begins. Then it's the being with people while they prepare themselves to decide if your bridge is strong enough for them to cross, and then trusting them to go on their own path. Fred is a weaver and untangler. Kate is an edge dweller and a scout. Anyone else wanna? You can say it out loud. You can explain. Baha, Bhakti Yoga is a warrior. Any more want to come through? We're nearly at the end of our class. And so this is going to be your time. And again, the reason why I like doing this is because there's so much questions. What do I do? What do I do with this time? You know, I think that a lot of questions are asking, what do I do? And I feel like when you can come into this essence piece of what is my archetypal energy, it's going to direct you, you know. What's the difference between love medicine class and this one? How to open hearts? Okay, so you're feeding me into my next thing. Okay, and I'm just going to, I'll answer that question because saying bridge builder, supporter, and something about looking, seeing, mirroring, honesty, and acceptance. Also a mirror, you know, so because a mirror, it's like, I'm going to show you it's here. Emmy is saying that she's a witness and a space holder. Oh gosh, thank you. Everyone's talking, nobody's listening. What's going to happen? Okay, so I'm gonna. This is kind of the end of our class. This is the end of the road where I'm gonna teach about this. Now I'm gonna. If you got what you wanted, then Heidi Ho, you're free to go. Well, I've never rhymed before. But if you would like to hear about some other things that are happening, and you guys are gonna be the first group that I'm actually gonna reveal a really amazing new class that I've been working and toiling over for the past many months. And it's a very new departure. I'll be really excited to share that with you. So the first thing that's happening is a course called Love Medicine. And this is a class that begins tomorrow. I'm just going to share my screen with you because it'll just be easier. Actually, I'm not going to bother sharing my screen with this. I'll just give you the link. So for Love Medicine, what this is this is a class that really was born very spontaneously. And it's very different than this one, Jessica was asking. So in this class, basically, it was looking at how do we work with the times, literally, and I got really inspired that right now we are in Venus retrograde. So Venus retrograde is a very powerful time. This planet is the closest to our planet than any other planet. And it is a time when she goes retrograde, it has a time when we can really, really examine our relationship to relationships. Right? Here we are as a collective. What are our barriers to love? Oh, well, it's in our face right now. So it's like, it's kind of a unique moment to really get in there and examine this. So this is a 4-week class that starts tomorrow. And I'm doing it and basically it's a process that I explained it a little bit where you can really go in there and explore your relationship to love itself. So maybe you're someone where you want to work with an unresolved love story and you want to do some healing work there, or perhaps you're like, whoa, this world is really wild and I want to tap into who I am as someone who stands in and for love and what is in me that is that wants to be expressed. or what barriers want to be removed or anything like that. So I'll be walking us through this 4-part process. And I'm also doing something I've never, I don't know if I'm going to offer this class again. I mean, I'm literally doing it with Venus retrograde. So I've never offered love medicine before. I'm literally doing it with Venus retrograde. And it's going to be, and the thing that is really different in this class is that I do it in alignment and collaboration with a lot of ritual. So it's not just us being in our heads, you know, doing the story, but it's really how do we actually step into a bigger story and come back into relationship where change and transformation happens, which is in collaboration with the elements. So you can get a ritual kit in addition to the class if you want, or you can collect the items on your own. But those, I will say the kit was made with a lot of tender love and care by Brittany Nelson. She actually hand picks and tends to every single bay leaf so that you can put your daily prayers on them. So there's all that kind of good stuff. In terms of pricing, you know, it's like everyone's in such different boats right now. You know, I love the expression, you know, we're all in the same story, but we're in different boats. So I put in a range of prices. I said, this is what the price is worth. And then I said, you know, and then you can choose a scholarship price if you need it, you know. And so it's really completely on your honor system in terms of what, you know, if you feel called to do the work, and if the story of money is in the way, I just encourage you to feel into both the generosity and also the, how do I say it, like, make sure that the artists get paid too. You know? So if you have the resource, don't go take the lowest scholarship available. So that's there. And that's going to be, it's a really beautiful group that's joining. And I think if you're feeling that call to be in a collective and go into the deepest wonderings of our hearts, I'll never talk this much during class, ever. It's a much more integrated approach. You get to work in pairs and in groups. There is one big assignment. So if you're thinking about it, I mean, we do start tomorrow. There's one assignment that you would want an hour to work on before we meet tomorrow. And then there's also a practice of actually how to work with Venus, because she just reemerged, that you'll also want. So you've got the link there, and that's that. And I'm going to tell you about one other thing. And this is so exciting. And I was not the most prepared. So just give me, because I do want to share this with you. And this is kind of a big deal in the sense that I sat and listened to what wants to happen in this time, you know, and what is coming alive out of the times that we're living in. One of the things that I really felt was this real call to deepen. How do we deepen into the work? And a lot of my work these past several years has been teaching these online courses about sacred storytelling and giving an introduction to them. But we haven't been able to go that deep. And so this year-long program literally came through my dreams. I was harassed through my dreams. It showed me the whole structure of it. And this story absolutely, completely lived me. And yes, by the way, for those of you who need scholarships, that's what they're there for. Please, you know, come do the work, and the scholarship is there for you. Absolutely. And know that there's so much going on for all of us. And then I'm just going to show you this one last thing. Sorry, I got distracted by that. Okay, so here we have, this is what's coming down the pike. I haven't announced it yet. You're the first group that's gotten to see it. And so this is called Sanctuary. And it's designed to be a place for people to come into deep relationship with who they are as creators. So this is part of an 11-module program. And this is the very first. And this first part of the program is where you actually get to, you know, again, let's go back to that very first quote, you know, that said, you know, the business of stories is not enchantment, it's not escape, it's waking up, you know. And so in this start, we got to really wake up to who are we as creators and what is living in our space, affects our belief systems, our values, but really like what we believe is possible in terms of what we can create. And so it's kind of an extraordinary process that's unlike anything I've ever led a group through. And what we're doing is we are actually redesigning one of the key rooms in our home. So that's how it starts, is we actually go into a practice of what is it to create sacred space. And it goes under the principle of how we relate to matter matters. And so within, so without. So as you get to go through and create the space of your bedroom, and at first, you know, when I was creating and like when the first call came to like, well, let's create this new sacred space, you know, the way that it started to happen was that I actually had some students, and I said, you know, I have this process when I go into deep creation processes where I create psychic silence, and I've got this, you know, guidebook. Do you want it? And a bunch of the people who were studying at the time said yes. I do want to take this, you know, I do want it. So when I went in to go create it, what I always do is I always go away to go on long retreats, and I get away from all the things so that all of that energy that's all in that matter can be cleared from my space, so I can create from a really clear and clean space. And I realized that here we are in COVID, and I couldn't go away to create. And so I had to actually make my space have that kind of clarity. And so I went into this deep process of creating sacred space through ritual. And so I ended up creating a guidebook that will lead you all through it. But I also created this process where you can identify all of the thought forms, all of the energy patterns, all of the belief systems that are living inside your psychic space that influence what you create. And this is really in the process of saying, how can we become more conscious and about what we create? And so sometimes our deepest challenges can be our greatest medicine, that could be our greatest offering to the world, but it's that thing that might be an unresolved pain or trauma, so we don't quite know how to work with it yet. And so this is really designed to get you to the place where you can kind of put your reins on your creative life force. I don't like that metaphor. I would say, let's put a saddle on the unicorn of your creative life force so that you can ride the energy. That's a little bit different. I like that better. So with this, you get the Psychic Silence Workbook, which is a 70-page guidebook. And I'm not going to go through all this because the website, you know, is here. But here's what I'm going to tell you, which is really exciting. So there are 3 different tiers in this one. And tier 1 is, you know, you get to, it's a 6-week class. You'll be held through the entire process. You receive the guidebook. You get guided meditation and creativity practices. We take everything that you discover while you're doing it on your own time, and then we do these really in-depth transformational storytelling experiences in class. So you have a way of metabolizing and making sense and meaning and purpose out of what you're working and discovering. There's a private Facebook group, and then, you know, if you can't come to dun, 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 here and back. Okay. So the thing that I was saying was, the thing that I know about these kinds of groups is that it's really making change and starting new patterns and stepping into your creative life force, like having that kind of accountability group, and having groups like people that are like really helping track you, and people who you can like also call upon and who are calling out your greatness. So you each get small groups, a committed group that really works with you. So that comes with tier 2. And then tier 3, you actually get like my entire master library of teachers. And then also you get an additional 4-week class called Mythos. And this is a class which is all about calling forth your you're taking and creating your personal creation myth, your personal creation story. So, you know, it's like, this is actually based on the principles of the starfish, which is all about regeneration. So we go into our space and we say, what needs to go? What needs to be cleared out? energetically, physically, mentally, spiritually, like, well, how do we clean the house? And once we've discovered, you know, there's that going in, and then we're going to go back out in terms of saying, okay, now what wants to grow out of this space? What is our new story? And we'll spend 4 weeks working just on that new story. So I'm really excited, because for those of you who've studied with me before, you know that we haven't gotten to go that deep into one story. Here's our bonus teachers, who I'm just really excited about. And you're going to learn things that you wouldn't normally learn. And this is really like my dream class. That's what we got going over here. So, you know, in terms of what does it mean to create sacred space in your home and outside of your home? What does it mean to create a temple space? You know, both in your home and how does it mean to become a temple keeper? So what I did is I love integrating our wisdom teachers, our teachers who are carrying the old knowledge, so that we can integrate this into all parts of life. And so Diana is going to teach us about anointing and scent priestessing, and what is it to work with the old oils as you prepare yourself to be a sacred storyteller, as you prepare your space to create and contain. We're going to be doing rituals and earth-based rituals, and some of those involve planting seeds. And we're actually going to get to hear from Alika, who is a Hawaiian indigenous farmer. And he is an amazing being. And it just so happens on the day that he's going to teach us, it's the day that's honoring the god Lolo, which is the god of agriculture. And it's really about what is spiritual gardening, and what is it, again, to clear yourself and clear yourself to plant seeds. So it's both in the physical form, right, in the garden, but it's also in the metaphorical garden, because as storytellers, that's what we do, we plant seeds. So it's, again, as within, so without. This is the real theme of this class. Then there's Elaine, who's going to teach about awakening your inner temple and how do you create sacred space. And then there is the lovely Kristen, who is going to lead you on an intuitive drawing class, so you can create your own medicine shield that lives in your space. So it's your individual symbol. And the person who isn't on here, who I'm just delighted, is Brooke Medicine Shield. She's an indigenous elder from the Lakota tradition, and she's going to be telling us the story of White Buffalo Woman and of the Rainbow Time, and she's going to be teaching basic practices of ritual and ceremony. So it's to me, it's like the big picture of what does it mean to become a storyteller of our time, and how do you become a conscious creator and understand the depth and breadth of what that is. And then finally, you have an opportunity to get a ritual kit. These are hand created for us by Brittany. I told you, but she's the same person who did the love kits. These are beautiful, and these each throughout the class, you'll be given an opportunity to ritualize what you're doing, and as you're working with your stories and as they're changing. So there's that piece. And then this goes into all the details, which I'm not going to go into because I just talked so much. And wow, that was so much information. So I'm going to leave it with that and say, if there's any questions, I'm happy to stay and answer some questions if you have that. And if not, then I can give you a quote and we can go on our way. Okay, thanks, Fred. All right, yes, Emmy.
Yeah, I have, this is actually the first webinar class I've attended. I know I emailed you because it felt like every time that I would see an email, it was like already passed. So I haven't done any work with you yet. I guess the second course that you shared, the sanctuary, definitely resonates more. Would it be too much to, I don't know exactly the commitment in terms of time, like would it be too much to do both sanctuary and the love medicine? I'm looking at, I'm like, am I in avoidance with love medicine, or is it just that sanctuary is what's needed right now?
Well, you know the answer to that one. I can't tell you the answer to that. What I always say is, great to see you, and I'm glad that the timing finally worked out. And what I would say is, like, in terms of this, like, literalness, in terms of time, you have enough time. So love medicine starts tomorrow. Sanctuary doesn't start until after love medicine is done. I think the first class of sanctuary is the day before the last class of love medicine. And that's, they won't interfere with each other that way. And always, like, you always want to trust, like, obviously you've got life for sanctuary. So it's like, I always tell people when they're started to listen for class, listen to your bones, listen to what your bones say, where you light up. But then also, like, as with resistance, sometimes resistance shows us where we need to have our persistence, and so sometimes there's just no energy for it, or sometimes there's a lot of energy for it. It's just not the kind of energy that you want to work with, but it could be fun. So yeah, you're welcome, Fred. All right, any other questions? Did you get your answer? Did you get your question answered?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well then, oh, Elaine, you just missed the whole class. But I'll send out a video momentarily. So just keep an eye out for the replay and you'll get to see the whole thing again. Not as much fun, but it will be there. All right. I wish you all the well. I'll leave you guys with a quote. This is one of my favorite quotes. And this quote is by Stephen Jenkinson. And I can't think of anything more appropriate for these times. We always end and begin with quotes because as storytellers, it's a nod. It's like we're nodding to those who are on the path, who have come before us. And we get to claim our place on the path and we honor these people that have come before us. Act as if you're a people of consequence so that I can treat you as such. And you matter. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence in this world? I'm going to read that again because it's really something. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence in this world? It's a velvet gauntlet, this idea of being a consequence. It doesn't clink when it hits the ground, but you can feel it. It would be proper to proceed that there is consequence to us being here. So Stephen Jenkinson leaves us with those words, and I wish you all the best. And I look forward to seeing and weaving with you again in whatever way makes sense. And if you know other people who you think would be inspired or served by these classes, definitely, I always appreciate people sharing this. And I wish you all the best. Take good care. I'll take you all off mute and you can say goodbye. Here we go. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Nice to see you, Elaine.
Thank you.
They're really wonderful to see. I love it when people bring off their videos because I get to actually see you, and it's such an extra treat. So, bye-bye. Take good care.